Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Your Best Life Yet Summit. I'm Nicole Mahalski, and I want to introduce you to the summit. We are going to be looking at all areas of your life, from personal to business or career, home, and even your relationships. So our guests are going to actually give you great insight and tools into how you can live your best life yet. And we're going to look at allowing you to create more joy, time, money, and even freedom in your life. I'm super excited to introduce our guest today, Melody Warnick. Hi, Melody.
Hi, Nicole.
I want to give you a proper introduction. So I have a little bit written down here. Melody is the author of This Is Where You Belong, The Art and Science of Loving the Place You Live, an exploration of the groundbreaking concept of place attachment. Richard Florida has actually said that this book is so important for many people because of choosing their place to live. And This Is Where You Belong helps movers and even stayers alike rethink the value that their community has to offer. In her 15 years as a freelance journalist, Melody has written for The Guardian, Atlantic City Lab, Quartz, Reader's Digest, the Oprah Magazine, Redbook, Better Homes and Gardens, and many other publications. She and her book has also been featured in Time, Fast Company, Psychology Today, Realtor.com, Forbes.com, and even Inc.com. A chronic mover, Melody managed to fall madly in love with her adopted hometown of Blacksburg, Virginia, where she lives with her husband and 2 kids. So welcome, Melody.
Thanks so much for having me, Nicole. I'm really happy to be here and talking with you today.
Well, we're happy that you're able to be here and share some insights with you. I asked Melody to share with us her inspiration around the book, This Is Where You Belong. After being introduced to the book, it actually allowed me to really have a different look at my own community and really look at some of the things that I had been missing and really could use and take advantage of in just my daily activities that were surrounding me. I wasn't aware that they were even there or how helpful these kind of things would be. So I'm going to let Melody explain a little bit more about this. And if we want to just jump right in and get started with, I'm curious, what really inspired you to do the research for this book?
So I was a person who moved a lot, and I wasn't always like that. I grew up in Southern California, lived on the same cul-de-sac for the first 18 years of my life. And it really wasn't until after I went to college and my husband and I, got married right around when we graduated from college, and we moved cross country from Utah to Maryland for my husband to take a job. And that kind of spurred this process of doing that every few years or so. We lived in Maryland for 3 years, then moved back to Utah, lived there for a couple of years, moved to Iowa to go to grad school, moved to Texas to take a first job, and then moved to Virginia for another job. And every time we moved, we would have to go through this process of getting to know the community, trying to feel a part of it, trying to feel not so new and strange in this place. And there would always be this part of me too that thought, well, the next city is going to be the one where we just really fit in and everything works and is perfect. Life is better. We're better people in this place. But it was never the place we were actually living. It was always in my mind, the next city. So we moved to Blacksburg, Virginia, and almost immediately I was like, this isn't really working for me. I've been here a couple months, given it like the old college try, and it's not really working, and let's move on. But I realized that I couldn't continue to expect that a place would fix me and solve all my problems. And I also realized that my kids were maybe going to have enormous therapy bills at some point if I kept taking that approach. My older daughter was about to start 5th grade, and it was her 3rd school in 3 states. And I realized that I needed to learn to simply settle down, to plant some roots in a place, even though I might not stay there forever, that I needed to learn how to be happy while I was there, be happy with where I was, become part of the community. And so that was my goal in Blacksburg. And that sent me into research about it. I'm, like you mentioned, I've been a journalist for my whole career, writing for magazines. And so, when there's a problem, my approach is, let's find out what research says about this. And I learned fairly quickly that this is something that scientists and psychologists look into. And there is an actual term for that feeling of being at home in a place, and it's called place attachment. And place attachment, it turns out, is incredibly healthy for you. It increases your sense of happiness and well-being, your self-esteem. And I wanted that. So then it became a process of figuring out, how do I get that in my life? How can I and how can other people build place attachment? So that was the start of This Is Where You Belong, that kind of led me down this road and found so much good stuff that I wanted to share it with other people.
You brought up an interesting point that I heard. You said that so many times I think that we get stuck in a rut maybe, or we're just not really happy. And we think, well, maybe if we got a fresh start, if we tried somewhere else, maybe that'll make us feel better. But I know I've moved a couple times too, and it really doesn't. You move there with all these great expectations. And I find that even sometimes you get even more disappointed or a little bit depressed maybe, because it's not what you thought it was going to be.
Right. I think there is power in the idea of a fresh start. That's so appealing. We will just leave all the old stuff behind. And for me, it was always things like, I'm having issues with this neighbor, or, my kid isn't super happy in school. We will just kick all that to the curb and we will move on and we will start brand new someplace else. And you always have this idea in your mind that when I do that, when I start brand new in a new place, that I will completely be able to reinvent myself, that I will not pick up any of my bad habits, almost like I will have a personality lobotomy when I move into a new town. And I've learned, like you have over time, that isn't entirely true. There is some research that suggests that new starts, especially, big moves, cross country, things like that, can be a good time to make changes in your life. But for the most part, we are who we are. There's a kind of fable that I've heard where people are traveling through a town and there's a man standing there who lives there. They stop and ask him, tell us about this town. And are the people nice? Do you enjoy it here? And the man says, well, what were the people like in your last town? What was your last community like? They say, oh, it was great. We loved it. The people were so kind. It was wonderful. He said, you will find that the people in this community are a lot like that. So they drive on and the man continues walking, and soon a second car full of people stop and they say, we're just moving. Tell us what this community is like. He says, what's your last community like? And they say, it was terrible. Everyone was awful to us. And, we hated it there. So you will find that this community is a lot like your last community. And so the idea there is you kind of take yourself and your attitudes with you wherever you go. So if you struggle with your current community, unfortunately, that might point to this idea that you'll struggle with your next one too, unless you kind of consciously change your approach to your town, which is what I tried to do when I moved to Blacksburg.
And what a great concept and strategy too. I know in so many different areas of our life, it's true. We try to change something, but if we don't change our attitude towards it, then the same things start happening and we start feeling the same way again. So can you talk to us, just about what really makes the difference between just living in a place and actually being able to call it home?
So a huge part of this, of interacting with just a place and actually having a home, is the meaning you create for yourself in that place. I call it in the book putting pins in the map, creating positive experiences for yourself and little bits of meaning in your place that makes it home, that makes it more than just, the place I live, the place I come after my long work day and collapse. And when I say home too, I'm, talking not just about your physical structure, your house or your apartment, although I think that is a big part of how we feel at home in a community. But I'm talking about the larger community, your town, your city, your neighborhood. And so a lot of what we do to create that meaning builds place attachment, builds that sense of love and connection and investment. So when I wanted to create that for myself in Blacksburg, I started looking at what research said mattered in places, what kinds of things made people happy and made people feel connected. So for instance, there's a lot of research that shows that when you walk in a place, you feel a sense of ownership for it. You feel like it's your place that, you come to know it in a way that you never can in a car or on a bus because you're seeing it sort of in slow motion. And there's also a lot of research that says people love walkable neighborhoods. They gravitate toward places where, you can leave your house and you're in a neighborhood where you can go to a restaurant or a shop or whatever, things like that. So when I moved into my neighborhood here in Virginia and I wanted to feel more at home, I started walking. And a lot of that was just, I walk for exercise because I hate running. And, I would just take walks around my neighborhood. But while I did that, I developed a sense of relatedness with the things around me. I learned the name of the dog that always barked at me behind his invisible fence. I learned which houses had the pink plastic flamingos in the front yard. I developed my favorite trees, and this is my favorite Japanese cherry tree. So I think that things like that create your own sense of meaning in your town, make you feel like you belong there, make you want to stay. There's a lot of research that shows that at the root of those feelings of belonging and connectedness are social relationships. So particularly when you're new in a town, but even when you've been in a town for a long time, there is a lot of benefit that comes from, say, getting to know your neighbors. I'm a terrible neighbor. I'm, the kind of person who will wave, but I don't know your name and, would never invite you in or anything like that. So as part of this project of writing This Is Where You Belong, I created what I call Love Where You Live experiments, like little purposeful behaviors that I forced myself into that were designed to make me feel better about my community. So I celebrated Good Neighbor Day, which is coming up at the end of September, at least in America it is. And I took banana muffins around to my neighbors. I've invited my neighbors over for a dessert potluck. Everyone brought a different dessert to share. One of the stories that I tell in the book that I really like is about a woman named Tanya Beeler, who moved into a neighborhood in Indianapolis, and she and a few other neighbors formed a group that held Sunday night dinners. And every week, a different family would host a Sunday night dinner. And it ended up being for like 60 or 70 people or something. But you would make, pans of lasagna, people would come, they would all find a corner to sit in your house, and everyone would just kind of hang out. If that is your neighborhood, you're going to love it there. You're going to feel a sense of friendship and connection that's really powerful. So those are just a couple examples of some of the things that make us feel at home in our places, and that either make us want to stay or make us want to get even more involved in our communities, really make us feel a part of it.
I think those are great insights. I know so many of us, we just get caught up in our busy days that we honestly don't we don't even think about getting to know our neighbors really, or don't make the time to do that. And there's such great people out there that we're really missing out on some of the amazing things that our neighborhood has to offer. I know even walking, I'm so guilty of this. We're so used to getting into the cars, especially when you have kids. It's kind of easier just to pack them up and go where
Right.
you need to go. Now, we don't take the time just to, we could probably walk to the grocery store or the market. And it was interesting, after going through some of your research and your book and other things like that, I actually had to send my car in to go get repairs. And it was taking a little bit longer than what they had told me. So I was without a vehicle for 2 days. But I'm lucky enough that I live really close to downtown. And instead of just kind of hanging out at home, me and the kids, we walked to the grocery store when we needed to get some milk or something for supper. And it was really interesting to walk downtown and see we live in a really old community. So there's really cool architecture and buildings and stuff down there, but really take the time to enjoy our walk and go do those different things that on a regular day we just don't, because we just hop in the car and kind of go. But those are things that can really, it totally changed the way that I looked at my community, and really appreciated the fact that, you know what, I'm pretty lucky that I can actually walk down here and get whatever I need is within walking distance for me.
I love that story, because I think that that is exactly what happens. Like, it is easier to just not pay any attention to your community. One of the things that I did as a Love Where You Live experiment was try to buy more things locally, shop at locally owned independent stores instead of buying everything on Amazon or at Target. And that was hard because it's a little more expensive sometimes. It takes more time. But when I made this, little bit of effort to do that, there were paybacks of feeling like I was contributing to, the economic welfare of my community. It's much better for towns. More money circulates locally when you shop at independent businesses than when you buy things at Amazon. I got to know some of the shop owners. I developed some relationships, and it just makes you feel good. But it does take that extra little bit of time. And, that's your experience too. It's way easier to just throw your kids in the car and drive to the grocery store. But when you force yourself to take this extra step, it is part of how we create meaning in our communities. And I think it's kind of a good plan for life in general. Slow down and sometimes do things the hard way simply because they're better for you, and they're better for other people, and they're better for your community. But it does take a little bit of conscious effort, which can be hard.
It is. It's just changing your routine up a little bit to really make time to do that and to
Right.
create that in your life. So you talk a little bit about place attachment. Can you explain a little bit about the geographic cure and what you mean by that?
Yeah. So, the geographic cure is, it's this idea that if you find the right place for you, that everything in your life will be better. Everything will fall into place. And that certainly was what I expected when I moved from Texas to Blacksburg, Virginia. I really just had in my mind that this is going to be Mayberry. I'm going to sit on my front porch with my lemonade, and, I'm going to have my vegetable garden. Never mind that I'm not a gardener. It's like we think that the place will turn us into the kind of person we want to be. And that if that doesn't happen, it's because there was something wrong with the place. We just didn't mesh with the place. It wasn't the right place for us. So I have a few thoughts about that. First, that there certainly are places that are a better fit for us than others. There's this idea of place compatibility, that places have personalities much like people, and that if you find a place that fits with who you are deep down as a person, you'll probably be a little happier. You'll feel a little more comfortable. You'll have an easier time finding your tribe in that community. And all those things are really beneficial. But I think that a lot of us spend a lot of time thinking about and planning and obsessing about how can we get to that magical Shangri-La community where we just fit and everything is great for us. You know, people spend their entire lives anticipating moving to their dream retirement community at the beach or whatever. And, you know, it's like for 30 years, you've put your life on hold in your current community, just imagining how great it will be in your next community. So place attachment is, it's a fancy scientific phrase for that emotional bond that you have with a place, that feeling of, you know, I belong here, this is home. And what I've learned about it is you can have that feeling with multiple communities, and that you don't have to wait for the perfect town to feel like that. That place attachment is something you can consciously cultivate in your life. So if you are in a community that doesn't really feel like home, maybe you didn't have a lot of choice in moving there, maybe because you're in the military or because you know, you got a great job there that you couldn't pass up and then moved and thought, what have I done? If you are in a situation like that where you're just not particularly happy with where you are, you can change those feelings. And that was my driving force behind doing Love Where You Live experiments and writing This Is Where You Belong. Is I wanted to change how I felt about my town. I didn't love it. And I was thinking a lot about moving away. You know, when can we leave and find the place that's a better fit? And so instead of looking to the geographic cure, looking for the place that will cure you, my encouragement is to make the place where you are right now feel like home. And you can do that.
That's a great strategy. I know it kind of relates back to a lot of different areas maybe in our life where we think, you know, when this perfect time happens, then we'll be able to do this, or I just need to fix this up first, and then I'll be able to do that thing that I want to do. But it brings it all back to we can do what we want to do where we are right now. We just have to change our attitude and really make the best of the situation. And that it's all
Right.
within us.
I think a lot of us suffer from what I call restless soul syndrome, that we have this desire to move on. And that's a very human desire for novelty in our lives. We like new things. We like new adventures and new experiences. And so sometimes when you are in a place, it can feel tiresome. And we start thinking everything is going to be different when A happens, you know, when I get married, or when I get divorced, or when the kids are a little older, or when I finally have kids. There's always something, you know, coming down the pike that is going to change everything for us, you know, something that we're looking to that will suddenly be the switch to our, you know, our life happiness. And I have really worked hard to learn to be content with my life right now. And that's, you know, a lot of that is being content in your community, learning to befriend the people who are here instead of, you know, wishing, man, if there were only more artists in my community or only more, you know, athletes or whatever, you know, then I'd be happy. Don't think like that. Think, you know, what can I do to be happy with my life the way it is right now? And if there are things that absolutely prevent you from being happy, then, you know, work on changing those. But we don't necessarily need like a global burn it all down kind of change to be happy. I think that's really appealing. Like I read a Humans of New York post recently on Facebook where the woman featured said, you know, I have a great job, I make a lot of money, I have good colleagues, but my life is really boring. I just feel like I go to the same restaurants and the same bars. And so I am quitting my job and I am moving to France, and I'm just going to start all over again in a place that, you know, that I can feel like a tourist in my own life again. That's what she said. in my own life. And it was interesting reading the comments on this post, because some people were like, go get him, girl. Like, that sounds amazing. I want to quit my job and move to France. Who wouldn't want to do that? But then there were a lot of people who were sort of like the voice of reason, saying, chances are good that you're going to move away and you'll realize that the thing you were really looking for was right here, where you already are right now. So we have to learn to balance those competing desires in our lives, that desire to burn it all down and start over, and, maybe desire for a deeper rootedness, a deeper connection with what we're already doing.
I think that's so true. I know a lot of us, and myself included, sometimes we think it's those big changes or big decisions that are going to have the most or highest impact on our life, when really it's not. It's those little changes that you can make, those subtle shifts that are going to help to improve your life.
Yeah.
And that's really what we need to focus on, which brings me into my next question. What are some of the key features that we should really take into consideration when looking for a new place to live?
So there are a few things that, I think of as, little happy signs in your town. Things that if your town has these, chances are good it's a community that loves itself, that people who live there love it and are trying to make it better. Things like a farmer's market, things like interesting local shops, things that make your community unique, that aren't just, a strip mall full of Olive Gardens and Applebee's, but there is a local entrepreneurial community here. I think community events are a sign of love, that people who live in that community love it. And I also think that access to nature is huge. Parks or hiking trails, things like that. I also think that most of us have one or two things that really help us feel like we belong in a community, and they might be different for everyone. If you're a foodie, it might be a really happening local restaurant scene. For me, as a library junkie, my first stop is always the public library. Like if we have a good public library in this town, I can make it. I can survive. So some of it is elements that are probably universal to every community. Walkable towns are easier to love than other kinds of towns. And if you live in a walkable community, that helps you connect with it quicker. But some of it might be very unique to you. The thing that I like to talk about too is that you might live in a community that has none of that. We don't have a farmer's market, there are no local businesses, but a lot of those things you can change. Individuals can have a hand in shaping their communities. I just came back from giving a talk in Fargo, North Dakota. And when people think of Fargo, they think of the movie, right? Where, it's like terribly violent and, a body gets put in a wood chipper. And if that is your mental image of Fargo, that's not a really positive image for people to have. But Fargo is a community that has really embraced other people's contributions. It welcomes people who live there having good ideas and bringing them to fruition. So up until a few years ago, they didn't have a farmer's market. And a few community members said, we want a farmer's market. Let's change this. And they put one together, not people who were government employees or who necessarily had a lot of know-how, just simply citizens who lived there who wanted things to be different and wanted things to change. And I think we see that in a lot of communities all over, that people want to turn their towns into what they want to see. And I love it when citizens do that, when average people say, hey, I want to make a change here. So if you're in a community where, for whatever reason, you need to stay there right now and it's not what you want, get involved. Like, chances are good that you can make some of the small incremental changes that will turn it into if not your dream community, then at least a lot closer and a place that you can feel like home. And the process of doing that will build those feelings of place attachment incredibly quickly.
That is so true. And it ties right into my next question, which was, how can we improve the way that we feel about our community if moving isn't an option? And we talked a lot about, getting to know your neighbors, really going for a walk and just checking it out and seeing what's around. And you brought up such an amazing point, is if there's stuff that you don't like or stuff that you want to see, really take the action, get the community involved, and really go after what you want. Like a farmer's market, I think, is an amazing thing to have in your community. I couldn't imagine not having one. So for the people
Right.
that took that initiative to go out there and create that, that's an amazing way to bring your community together and really kind of plant your flag there too. Is there anything
Yeah.
else that we could do to really, help us feel better about the place that we're living?
Yeah, absolutely. A few more ideas. Every community is good at something. It just may not be the thing that you want it to be good at. So, I grew up in Southern California where it was, we lived just north of Disneyland. So that was sort of my frame of reference. Like, you get to go to Disneyland several times a year. And so when I moved to other places, that especially smaller communities, there certainly was a sense of, man, there is nothing to do here because we don't have an enormous amusement park. And I had to train myself to recognize the things that my town did excel at, even if they were different from what I originally hoped for or expected. So my current town doesn't have a big art museum. It definitely doesn't have an amusement park. But one thing it's really good at is college football. It's a university town. Virginia Tech University is here. And when it's football season and there's a football game in town, people tailgate. It becomes this massive, form of entertainment. And I'm not a football fan at all, by a long shot. But in my efforts to try and feel more of a sense of connection with Blacksburg, I went to football games. Not a ton, but a few, and I tried to train myself to like the thing that my town was good at. And so I'm still not really a football fan, but I've learned to enjoy that feeling of being at the games. They play the music, everyone like screams and jumps up and down. So I like that. So I think, a big part of learning to feel at home in your town, learning to love it if you don't right now, is simply recognizing the good things about it. An easy starting point is make a list of all the things in your town that you would take a visiting relative to or show off to a friend. Those can be things that you've done already or things that you haven't done. Make a bucket list for your community, particularly when we've lived in a place for a long time. We start to ignore the things that our town is good at. How many New Yorkers have never seen the Statue of Liberty because, it's always there and why bother? And so if that's you in your community, make a list of all the things that you meant to do. Ask people for their recommendations. I tell the story in the book of a woman who moved to my town, and she would just chat people up at stores, at restaurants, and say, what do you love about Blacksburg? What are your favorite things to do here? And got all sorts of ideas that she wouldn't have thought of. So, I love that idea for any place that you live or visit. Ask the locals what they love. And you may get ideas that you've never thought of. You may hear about places that you've never been. Add those to your list and make an effort to do things that create that sense of attachment in your town. So you're not just living there, biding your time, you're creating meaning for yourself, you're creating happy connections, and you're creating a sense of community that will make you happier and healthier and make you want to stay.
I think those are all great ideas. It's so amazing how just shifting your focus on all the good stuff, all the positive things that you have, can really transform the way that you think about things in your life. And it's no different for your community. If you just switch to, we've got all these great things here and we need to focus on that, then you're just automatically going to start feeling better about the place that you live.
Right. I
Really,
mean, it's kind of a simple practice of gratitude, which is helpful for all parts of your life. Like we can all find things to complain about our communities. And sometimes that's the only time we think about them. It's like,
mm-hmm.
the snow didn't get plowed, or, my water bill is too high. But instead, what is your city doing right? And be grateful for that.
So true. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
I will give you one more idea that is a Canadian idea. um, so my friend Lindsay Ziervogel lives in Toronto, and she developed the Love Lettering Project. I think that's the website, Love Lettering Project. And she just kind of as a fun little art project started writing love letters to her city. Dear Toronto, you have amazing public pools, or whatever. I really enjoy your waterfront. She put them in little envelopes, and she would hide them in places where strangers would find them. So like in the stacks in the library, or she put them in someone's bike spokes or on their windshield or something. And other people would open them and read them. And it would just be this little, bit of bliss and happiness for other people. She tells a story of someone who had moved from British Columbia to Toronto, hated it, was thinking of moving back, and she found one of these love letters, and it made her feel so much better about living in Toronto that she stayed and has since become, a upstanding member of the community, a leader in Toronto. So I recommend that as a little fun experiment that you can do in your town. Write a love letter to your community. It will make you focus on what your town is doing right. And when other people find it, it will make them have those similar happy feelings. So it's just a little experiment in happiness for everyone.
Well, that's such a great project to do, and would be so cool to be somebody that found one of those
Right.
notes there to read that.
So
That would be
fun.
awesome.
Yeah.
You bet. So if you guys want to know more about Melody and her amazing projects, and her website is melodywarnick.com, and she's also on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Melody Warnick. So I hope you guys go there and check that out. She's got lots of great resources on her website. You guys can think of many great projects to do. Maybe get some of your neighbors together and just go check it out and really get to know your neighborhood and your community a little bit better, because I'm sure there's things that you didn't even realize were around if you just take the time to go do that. Melody, I want to thank you again for really taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here with us. I'm so excited to be able to do this interview, and I know that you're going to have much more amazing stuff for us to see in the future. So I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks so much, Nicole. It was really fun talking to you.